The farm sat in the middle of what the developer's site plan called Phase 2. It was 34 acres. It had a white farmhouse with a metal roof, a bank barn that needed paint on the south face, a 2-acre kitchen garden in the east field, and a woman named Eunice Tapp who had lived on it for 51 years and had no interest in leaving. The site plan showed 340 new residential lots surrounding her on 3 sides. The 4th side was a county road. The developer, a regional residential construction firm called Meridian Homes, incorporated in Columbus, Ohio, had acquired the parcels to the north, east, and west of the Tapp farm in a series of transactions between March and September of 2019. They had paid between $6,200 and $7,400 an acre for ground that, until recently, had been growing corn and soybeans in Warren County, Ohio. They had assumed, when they began assembling the parcels, that the Tapp farm would come along. Small acreage, elderly owner, no children in the county. The math seemed straightforward. Eunice was 69 years old when the first offer arrived. She read it at the kitchen table, set it face down beside her coffee cup, and went out to check on the bees. The offer was for $9,100 an acre. For 34 acres, that was $309,400. She did not call them back. This is the kind of story my father would tell. If yours did too, this channel is for you. Subscribe and we'll keep telling them. The first offer had come in October of 2019, 3 weeks after Meridian completed the last of their surrounding acquisitions. Eunice had known it was coming. She had watched the for sale signs go up on the adjacent parcels over the preceding months, and she had watched them come down again faster than farmland usually moved, and she had understood what the pattern meant without needing anyone to explain it to her. She had lived in Warren County her whole life. She had seen the development pressure move south from Dayton and west from Columbus for 20 years, swallowing townships that had been farmland as long as anyone could remember. And she had watched it reach the edge of her road, and she had not been surprised. She had been thinking about it since her husband died. Earl Tapp had died in November of 2017 after a short and bad illness that moved faster than either of them had expected. He was 72. He had farmed the 34 acres in Warren County since 1981, when he and Eunice had bought it from an estate for $1,400 an acre. $47,600 total, financed through the Farm Credit Office in Lebanon, and he had farmed it the way he farmed everything, carefully, with attention to what the ground told him, without waste. The farm was not large enough to be a primary income. Earl had worked off the farm for most of his career, 26 years at a manufacturing plant in Franklin, and the farm had been what it was because he and Eunice had wanted it to be, not because they needed it to be. They had grown sweet corn and tomatoes and winter squash for the Lebanon farmers market since 1989. They had kept bees since 1994. They had run a 2-acre plot of specialty cut flowers, zinnias, sunflowers, lisianthus, celotias, that supplied 3 florists in the county and sold direct at the market on Saturdays. Earl had made a specific decision in the early 2000s about how to manage the soil on that 34 acres that had seemed, at the time, more principled than practical. He had pulled the farm entirely out of conventional inputs, no synthetic fertilizer, no herbicide, and transitioned it to certified organic production over a 3-year period that was genuinely difficult and that produced 3 lean market seasons before the soil biology came around and the yield stabilized and then, to his measured satisfaction, improved. He had not done this because organic commanded a premium at the Lebanon market, though it did. He had done it because he had read about soil health for long enough that he believed the conventional approach was mining something that would not be replaced, and he was not interested in mining things on land he intended to keep. He had intended to keep it. He had said so to Eunice without drama, in the matter-of-fact way he said most things, more than once in the last years of his life. He had not left a formal document about it beyond the will, which left the farm to Eunice outright. He had not needed to. She had heard him. Lois Peterman, who worked the front counter at the Warren County Assessor's Office in Lebanon, said later that Eunice Tapp had come in sometime in the late fall of 2017, not long after Earl's funeral, and asked to see the property transfer records for the parcels adjacent to her farm. She had not explained why. She had sat at the public records terminal for about an hour and taken notes on a small pad she had brought with her, and then she had thanked Lois and left. Lois had noted it because it was unusual, not in any troubling way, just the specific quality of attention a person brings to something they are preparing for, rather than something that has already happened to them. Eunice had been preparing. She understood from the transfer records and from what she could read in the county planning documents, which were public and which she had also reviewed, that the land around her was being assembled for residential development, and that her farm was an obstacle in the middle of it. She understood that an obstacle in the middle of a development site was worth more to the developer than the land itself would indicate, because her 34 acres was not just 34 acres to Meridian Homes. It was the piece that determined whether Phase 2 was a contiguous development or a fragmented one. A fragmented development was worth less. A contiguous one was worth more. The difference, she believed, was larger than the offer they had sent her. She was not a real estate attorney. She had not studied development finance. She was a woman who had spent 36 years watching her husband read things carefully before he made decisions, and she had absorbed the method, if not always the subject matter. She wrote down what she thought her farm was actually worth to them, not in the market but to them specifically, and she put the number in the small pad she kept in the kitchen drawer, and she did not show it to anyone. The second offer came in January of 2020, $10,400 an acre, $353,600 total. The letter was warmer than the first one, with language about her legacy and the community's future and Meridian's commitment to thoughtful development. She noted the language. She declined again, by telephone, in about 4 minutes. Meridian sent a representative to the farm in March of 2020, a man named Scott who wore a fleece vest with the company logo and brought a folder of materials about the development and spoke at some length about the opportunity she was being presented with. He sat at her kitchen table. She offered him coffee. She listened to everything he said. When he finished, she told him the farm was not for sale and thanked him for coming out. He left the folder. She put it in the recycling. She was not hostile to Scott. She was not hostile to Meridian. She was simply a woman who knew what she had and what she intended to do with it, and she was not going to be moved by a folder. She called a farm attorney in Lebanon that spring, a woman named Diane Hauser, who handled agricultural property and land use in Warren County, and paid her to review the development plan, the zoning documents, and the adjacent sale transactions. Not because she was planning to sue anyone, because she wanted to know, with precision, what leverage looked like from the other side of the table. Diane's assessment, delivered over 2 meetings and a written memo, was that Eunice's farm was what planners called a key parcel. Without it, the Phase 2 site plan required either a redesign that would cost Meridian a significant number of lots, or a road access solution through the county road frontage that had its own complications. Neither option was cheap. Neither was as cheap as buying the Tapp farm at a number that made the problem go away. The number Diane suggested as a reasonable negotiating floor was $14,000 an acre. Eunice looked at that number. She looked at the number she had written in her small pad in the fall of 2017, 2 years before Meridian's first offer arrived. The numbers were not identical. They were close enough. The third offer came in August of 2020, $12,500 an acre. She declined. The fourth, in December of 2020, was $13,800 an acre. She declined. She had not yet called them. They were still calling her. She called them in February of 2021. She asked to speak to someone with authority to finalize a number. She was connected, after some navigation, to a woman in the Columbus office who had that authority. Eunice told her the farm would be available at $16,500 an acre, on a leaseback arrangement that allowed Eunice to continue farming and living on the property for up to 7 years at a nominal rent, with a right of first notice before Meridian broke ground on the Phase 2 parcels adjacent to the farmhouse. The Columbus office went quiet for 11 days. They called back on a Thursday morning and accepted. The sale closed in April of 2021. 34 acres at $16,500 an acre came to $561,000. The leaseback was for 7 years at $1 per year, with the right of first notice intact. Eunice was still living in the farmhouse the following spring. She was still keeping bees. The 2-acre kitchen garden was in its 33rd season. The florists in Lebanon were still getting their zinnias and their lisianthus on Fridays. Lois Peterman heard about the sale price through the assessor's office, where the deed transfer recorded the consideration amount. She told someone, and that person told someone, and by the time it had made 2 stops, it had reached the coffee counter at the Lebanon Farm Supply, where 3 men who had sold adjacent parcels to Meridian at $6,200 to $7,400 an acre were standing with their cups. Lois said later she did not know exactly what those men said when they heard. She imagined it was quiet. Phase 2 broke ground in the fall of 2022. The construction fence went up on 3 sides of the Tapp farm. The farmhouse and the bank barn and the east garden and the bee yard sat inside it, unchanged, with the metal roof and the unpainted south face and the zinnias coming up in rows that Earl Tapp had laid out in 2003, and that Eunice had maintained in the same configuration since, because they were correct and she had not found a reason to change them. She has 5 years left on the lease. She intends to use them. Earl Tapp bought 34 acres in Warren County in 1981 and farmed it carefully for 36 years and left it to the woman who had farmed it alongside him, with the understanding, unwritten, unnecessary to write, that she knew what it was worth and what to do with it. She did. She waited until they needed it badly enough to say so with a number. Then she told them what the number was. That is not a complicated idea. Most valuable things aren't. The difficulty is in having the patience to sit with something long enough to find out what it's actually worth, instead of taking what someone else decides to offer you in October when they think you are not ready for winter. She was ready. She had been ready since November of 2017, standing in the cold at the edge of a field her husband had left her, working out in her head what it was going to take to hold it. She held it for 7 years, on her own terms. Earl would not have been surprised. He would have noted it in the way he noted things, matter-of-factly, without excess, and gone back to whatever he was doing. He knew who he had married.